Speaking of Nebraska,
we live there.
We do live here, and we live in a state right now of cautious optimism
really nice
right now. Cautious. I mean, would you guys agree? There's cautious optimism.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the conversations have been largely positive. I think it's always fair to be fair and balanced, of also understanding if certain things don't happen. Oh, is this for me?
No, I'm just giving that to you.
Oh, I thought you were handing me something like a news story.
Oh, no.
Of fair and balanced.
That's just it.
It's the good people on Fox.
Can you get the little ticking sound?
Yeah. I think there are definitely things to keep in mind. Like, for instance, I don't know if this registers on your guys' radar, but the second team offense had maybe 4 turnovers. Not good.
Not great.
That's 4 more than you'd like to have.
Right. We know that if the turnover thing is not cured, no matter how many big strides you make in other areas as a football program, that's going to hold you back.
Won't be cured as much.
Exactly. So there's still a lot of wait and see, but I think there's cautious optimism. But I think I'll call this the off-season of Rule has been very, very positive, and it, I think, came to a head with what we all saw on Chasing 3, with the "this is why you lose" that has gone viral. And the conversation that came with that, this is why you lose, talking about when people are here, you get out of, the things that you know how to do. You quit working, you quit doing the things that you're taught to do, trying too hard, whatever it might be.
That's the stuff that should get you excited as a fan. Just the
And
little
it was,
things,
it was
attention to detail.
It was,
that's all you want.
It was true speak. And it was caught, it goes viral. There are a lot of people in various different outlets, whether we're talking about people who cover college football, NFL football, other sports, they see that, they hear that, they say, love that was brought up.
You said if they die, they die.
A lot of people who know Nebraska football understand, for the most part, that has been a losing program here in the last 6-7 years because, I'm sorry, until you get to 500 or better, you are a losing program. And I think this is the other part about
Jeff Fisher doing 8-8 stuff.
Yeah, even 8-8 would be great, or 6-6. But everything that Matt Rule has talked about from a positive side of where these guys are, he is quick to remind you that until they are not 5-7, they're still 5-7. Mm-hmm. And I thought even what he said over the weekend on Saturday of what he told the guys during the scrimmage, that they're this close to being a good team, but they're still not there. There's always, I don't even want to call it the dangling of the carrot, but it has a similar approach of this is how good you can be. But I think there's been a very good balance of not letting these guys settle into what I think for the most part is a relatively positive narrative, whether you're listening to guys like Joel Klatt, who I don't know how you feel about it, Jimmy. I think Joel Klatt's a good college football. Yeah, I think he's a good college football guy.
Usually loves him some Nebraska.
And he does. I don't think he's pandering to the audience. I think he's calling it as he sees it, I hope. But he's very high on Nebraska. Now, he said he put Nebraska in his top 25 after he had a conversation with Matt Rule.
Still can't believe they blew it after they went for 2 in 2000. But I know he wasn't the quarterback that day, but he was around.
Everything that you've heard come out of Matt Rule's mouth, like Pat McAfee, huge Matt Rule fan, because Matt Rule will talk football. There's always that feeling of, is he selling you a bill of goods? Is there? I've heard people at times that are not necessarily on board yet say, snake oil salesman. And until you get the fruits of the labor, that's fine. I mean, that's where Nebraska and Matt Rule have to prove some of those critics wrong. But the narrative continues to, I think, change the opinions, or at least show up on the radar of even some of the most staunch critics of Nebraska football in the past. So Colin Cowherd was talking with Urban Meyer. This was at the end of last week. And so on an appearance of the Herd, Urban Meyer was talking about a lot of reasons why you would want to join the Nebraska football program. He was talking about...
So old Herb was recruiting for Nebraska?
Yeah. Urban was...
Former Nebraska coach Urban Meyer?
Yeah. Remember that day against Oklahoma?
I do remember that day. He was
here for Big Noon?
A hell of a weekend.
Oh, the amount of Urban, be our next head coach. Will you take the job? Did you meet with Trev before you came on set?
How long before he goes to gate 25? Yeah.
So as he's talking about a lot of the things about the new facilities and things that he likes about Matt Rule, and again, talking about a lot of the highlights of why he, Urban, would want to join the Nebraska football program. There's also, it went back and forth with Colin and Urban Meyer about the history of the stadium, the fans.
Just loves those troughs.
Urban brought up all those things. But it also was interesting because I'll give this to Colin Cowherd. He doesn't care who the guest is. He's not always going to play off of what he thinks. If Colin Cowherd completely disagreed, he would have said that. But also bringing up Dylan Raiola was part of the praise. That Colin Cowherd as well was very much on the same page with Urban Meyer, who has him as one of the college football teams to look out for. And the reason I bring this up is because
he's Urban Meyer.
Well, not even necessarily Urban Meyer. The Urban Meyer part of this doesn't surprise me as much because I think Urban Meyer has spoke very highly of Matt Rule and
Urban likes
Nebraska.
Football.
Yeah, and I think he understands what Matt Rule could potentially do at Nebraska. But he said that I thought it was interesting that he talked about why wouldn't it was. I mean, you're right. You said this earlier, Jimmy. Urban was in a way kind of giving a recruiting pitch to people out there for Nebraska. But where I thought it was interesting is that Colin Cowherd actually got into this and jumped on the ship with the Nebraska hype train, if you will, because he's always been there was that famous label that he gave Iowa for a very long time as the fake ID club. And essentially, as he called him, a fake ID or a poser because they would schedule soft and then they would, win. They would build up a bunch of games that they would have as W's because they hadn't really played anybody. But when it came to playing somebody of significance, they wouldn't beat them. He's brought up Nebraska as being one of those places of why would you ever want to go to Nebraska when you could go to a USC? And Cowherd's, out there in LA.
Have you seen the traffic out there, Colin?
Yeah.
Didn't we talk about LA one segment? They scared me from going. I'll take Lincoln instead.
I thought it was interesting that he starts agreeing and citing a lot of the different things that, Urban Meyer brought up. And then, Colin Cowherd starts talking about how they're recruiting right now and talking about the history, how that can really be a big part. But more than anything, he brought up Matt Rule. And
Ben Lorenza.
I think this is the one thing that people, it could be a curse, but I think right now is a blessing on how people look at Nebraska football. And when you have personalities like a Colin Cowherd, who's usually going to be a little bit more harsh on the Midwest teams that are not named Ohio State or Michigan.
And he will tell you that. I've literally heard Colin say that.
To me, this also goes to the Matt Rule factor. We talk about this a lot of a guy who knows football, a guy who can talk football, who can articulate a lot of his plan, his vision on how he wants to make a football team better. And you do have a little bit of that track record there at Temple and at Baylor for a guy that I think everybody celebrated, whether you were interested in Nebraska or just interested in having good guys in college football. That was celebrated that he was back in college football after what was a failure in Carolina.
And I think he belongs in college football because I think he's a really damn good college coach.
Yeah. I think that there's also that part of Matt Rule's chapter of not only that he went, year 1 to year 2 jumps at Temple and Baylor, and then you get to the year 3s, but also, and I heard Urban Meyer bring this up and Colin Cowherd as well, that there's also something to take in about failing at the NFL level, but not letting it define you. And so,
if anything, that's what drives him.
Absolutely.
Remember,
and there are certain guys that it will. And I think every conversation that a lot of these media personalities, especially national media personalities or former coaches now turned media personalities like Urban Meyer, have that conversation with Matt Rule, he wins a lot of people over. And that's what this offseason has been, is that I think there's belief that, hey, you've got pretty much an entire defense coming back from a top 15 defense.
Pretty damn good, yeah.
So there's that. I think there's a lot of high regard for Tony White and the type of guy that he is. So that defensive side, there's a lot of respect there. There's a lot of intrigue and excitement over what Dylan Raiola could potentially be. But with all of that aside, a lot of this national narrative with Nebraska, who shows up on just about everybody's college football teams to watch, college football teams that could be a sleeper, college football teams that are looking to make a big jump in year 2 under their new head coach, that Nebraska shows up on a lot of those lists. And it's simply, in my opinion, those things that I mentioned before matter, but it's how Matt Rule sells his vision. It's how Matt Rule articulates that vision to where it doesn't seem like just lip service. Because I think the thing about Matt Rule, compared to other coaches that we've seen here in Nebraska when they're trying to right the ship, is it's not just a lot of pomp and circumstance, rah-rah, trying to pump the guys up. I think at times he's brutally honest with them. He's brutally honest with their history. He's brutally honest about a year ago of what kept them from being in a bowl game. And he gives you that blueprint, that inside look on how they're going about correcting it. Now, we all know, and even everybody who is jumping on this Nebraska bandwagon understands that, well, that's all well and good. If it doesn't happen, then you're back to where you were a year ago. But I think the ability to articulate that plan of attack in year 2, it seems so detailed and so well thought out that you feel like your players are on board with this. And if they can even do half of what you're saying, that's going to go from 5-7 to 7-5.
If you're consistent and you say the same thing, the message is always consistent. You start to believe it. And that's the whole idea. They're very consistent, very calculative. We've talked about this before, that not everything is not left to chance by Matt Rule. Yeah. Everything is said and done with an intention and a purpose. Everything
much more
they
candid
do,
than a lot of coaches.
Everything. And the players believe that, they feel it, and they feed off that. But this is why I've said all the time, if they're healthy, because that's what we started the show talking about, is, okay, this is becoming a little bit of a concern. Health has not been, but this is a concern from him because he's probably thinking the same thing. Mm-hmm. If we're healthy, look out. We're going to take some big strides this year.
Yeah, it's a good place to be from the standpoint of, hey,
but because the work.
You want your guys to believe that this year will be better. But you also want them to believe it's going to be better because, yeah, like you said, the work, what you have put in. And Gary brought this up a while back, and I think that this is a very underrated part of what you're seeing with Nebraska football in just year 2. And that is the development of the bottom half of this roster. Okay, you can roll out 22 to 25 guys collectively and say, all right, these are the guys we're going to roll to get the most reps and impact the game the most. But in moments like this, when a Javen Wright goes down or when a Teddy Prohaska goes down, and you have that type of hole to fill or depth to fill, that you feel in just a year and a half that what your coaching staff has done, led by the tone of the head guy, where you feel like everybody's getting reps. I love what Matt Rule said last week about now having all of the analysts having on-field roles, because the NCAA now allows that to happen, that those third level, fourth level guys are also getting detailed coaching and are getting as much attention as the guys in the first and second, maybe not with the same coach, but are also understanding that if all hell breaks loose when it comes to the injury front, and we've seen that. I mean, hell, Texas is a great example of what's happening to the running back room. You just never know what kind of hand you're going to be dealt there, that all you can do, every coach always says that next man up mentality, but we all know that next man up mentality may be a very, very scary proposition, that all you can do is at least get the guys that are behind them in the best position to know their role, know their job, and physically develop. So this goes to Corey Campbell as well, and physically developing these guys. It's just a very detailed plan of developing that bottom half as much as you're developing the top half.
And this is why when a coach gets hired, I've had many people tell me over the years, especially when I worked in that world, it is about the strength coach. That is the most important hire. Mm-hmm. And then they put the staff together because they're going to spend most of their time with the strength coach in the off season, in all the programs that's put together. It's Corey Campbell that is the star of the show for these guys to get better. And then once you get in towards the season, the other coaches with the stuff that they do. But these guys are built the way you talked about. Javen Wright, there's an example, ready to go, body's ready to go. And then it's unfortunate the things that happen, but it isn't because he didn't do the things to prepare to have himself ready, and will continue to have himself prepared for when he gets back and that he's in the right deal. So yeah, that's why they say next man up mentality, because you prepared those next men.
Yep.
It's one thing if they're not prepared or if you just don't have the dudes, because you can train that donkey all you want. Doesn't mean he's going to win the Kentucky Derby. However, once you have dudes and you are preparing them, the idea is, well, they say next man up because we prepared those next men to step up, and we're going to teach and we're going to build depth. Part of it, that's a development program.
He sells the plan better than anybody I've seen.
I believe him.
He absolutely does. And he has people believing. Here, I get it.
Not a homer.
Internally,
I just believe him. I really do.
We're cautiously optimistic, but a lot of the right buttons continue to be pushed.